Hey, welcome back. I am here to make another recipe. Haven't done this in a minute. Today I am making one of our family's favorites. Not Morgan's because she's a vegetarian, and this is a meat sauce. It's called Bolognese. And I hesitate calling it a sauce because it isn't really a sauce. It's more of a complement to noodles. It's very thick, it's very hearty, it's very rich, very meaty, very tomatoey. It is very decadent. It makes a lot. Most of the recipes that I've done up to this point have been something you can whip together at the end of the day, within 30 minutes or 45 minutes ish kind of thing. It's doesn't not typically not very time consuming. This is a bit of a project. It's not hard. None of it's hard. There's just a lot of stuff to cook, and it takes a while to cook it all, and then it all needs to kind of simmer together, and then like sort of sit together. Today, I'm planning on eating it tomorrow, so I'm making it a day ahead of time, and it tends to, like soup tends to get a little bit better, like after it's sit a minute and kind of all the ingredients had time to meet each other, maybe. But I'm making bolognese today. It is. It's definitely one of my wife's favorites. I make it for her birthday typically. I'm not sure if I said that already. And then I've noticed that when I'm doing this, it's really hard to do this on your phone. I'm doing this on my phone because I see a face and you want to look at the face. But when I look at the face, I'm not looking at the camera. So there's the camera and there's the face and there's the camera and the face. And it's hard not to look at your face when you see your face. Not that I have a great face to look at anything for sure, but it's just weird. So pardon me if I don't always look at the camera. Yeah, today we're making bolognese. Dig in. It's really, really, really good. Here we go. So today, some of this I'll do a little bit different just because there is so many ingredients. I want to kind of go over it a little bit first. This is something that from a step by step, you're going to want to use your big pan, a deep pan of some kind. You have a lot of ingredients. Back up and see most of these ingredients. It seems like a lot. It's not really a lot. Most of it hinges on these three things right here. This is what you're going to start with. You're going to start with about a pound of bacon, a pound of ground beef, a pound of ground sausage. I just bought this at the market this morning. It was frozen, so I've defrosted it already, but it's about a pound of ground sausage. If you can't find ground sausage, you can also use Italian sausage. I was going to say don't use the sweet Italian sausage because typically that has tarragon in it. But maybe you can definitely use spicy. This dish can be a little bit spicy. It's kind of nice. But really, mild Italian, just Italian sausage is good. Any kind you want, any kind you like. And also we have quite a few veggies. You start with the Trinity, which is the celery, the carrots, and the onion. You have some parsley for later. You have some Parmesan cheese. I'll start it off. So pound of bacon, pound of ground meat, pound of sausage or ground pork. This makes a lot. So a couple celery stalks. This is one big carrot. I may not use all of this, but like a carrot or a couple of carrots. This is like the size of like 5 carrots. I don't know. It's huge. Probably use about maybe half. I'll probably use all that onion actually. Use about a cup of chopped flat leaf parsley. This is Italian flat leaf parsley. It doesn't, parsley sometimes is really curly. This is actually really flat and really beautiful. It's also a lot more fragrant, a little bit more flavorful, easier to chop. I almost never get the curly parsley because it doesn't really add anything to it, whereas this actually does. Use a pretty decent Parmesan cheese. I think I might have said this before. This is Private Selections. It's like Kroger's kind of like bougie brand, if you will. It's I really like it. It's probably one of my favorites. If you can't get Parmigiano Reggiano, I use about a half a cup of grated Parmesan cheese. Use a can of tomato paste, a small can of tomato paste. I use about probably 6 to 8 cloves of garlic. Remember with this, it's just 6 or 8 dabs. Use about a cup of heavy cream or whipping cream. Maybe 3/4 of a cup of whipping cream. Again, I do this, I don't really, I don't measure stuff a lot, honestly. I do it till it looks right. Use about a cup of wine. Little tip about using wine: use a wine that you like. Use a wine that you would drink if you drink wine, a drinkable wine. Don't use like cooking wine, because cooking wine has tons of salt in it, and it'll make your dish really salty, and it just isn't good. You want to do something you would drink. I would drink this. It's not my first choice, but it actually is pretty good. Also, I like to get a big bottle. If you can tell, that's actually that's like 2 bottles of wine. Get a big bottle, and I get a screw cap. With the screw cap, you can, and this is my cooking wine, but I can just screw the cap back on and put it up and store it. Utensil wise, you're going to need like a cheese grater, a couple of knives, measuring cup, measuring spoons. You're also going to need about 4 cups of beef stock or beef broth, beef stock. If you don't get the canned or jarred beef stock, remember, stock is different than broth. Stock is much more flavorful. Broth is like kind of light that you can use like for a soup. It's not really good, not great for cooking because it doesn't imbibe a lot of flavor. But if you don't have that, you can use this. This is one of my favorite little tricks is this bouillon paste. It's actually just boiled down like, I guess, beef stock. So it's like super concentrated. So you can make really good stuff with that. Use warm water so it dissolves very well. Mixing bowl a little bit, can opener, and of course your pasta. Now today we have not made this with the cascatelli. This is cascatelli by Sporkful. Sporkful is a podcast that I like, and that he talks about making his own pasta shape and what it takes to bring that to sfoglini. All right, one of the things that we do is we will use mostly, we will take lasagna noodles, cook them, and then cut them in half lengthwise. So you got this really fat, thick, not as wide as a lasagna noodle, but like, a little bit smaller. Crush. And it really is nice, but you can really use any kind of pasta, but it needs to be kind of hearty and heavy, because this is a really heavy dish. And I realized there's one thing I forgot. Actually, I'm going to show you right here. This is, if you can see that or not, no, can't really zoom in. This is a nutmeg. It's a little nut, and that you grate. So you need a lot of nutmeg in this dish. It's very important that you use nutmeg. Not a huge nutmeg fan, but this dish definitely needs it. So I'm going to get started. All right, so I'm going to turn my pot on high. I'm going to get it good and hot. I'm using a deep pot because I'm pretty much going to make everything in this pot. Now I am going to cook some stuff in here and get it cooked and take it out, and cook some more stuff in there and take it out, and then put it all back together in here. But basically I can use this, and that's what this bowl is for. I have to adjust this thing so I can see, so you can see. But I am going to start with the bacon. I always start with the bacon. So most of this bacon just sort of disappears into the meat sauce, this ground meat sauce. But I like to try to cut it lengthwise and then chop it up. So maybe I can do all of this at once. We'll see. If I have a sharp knife, this knife is good and sharp. Yeah, there we go. Now, normally I use a wooden cutting board, but sometimes if I'm cutting a lot of vegetables in this, I'll use 2, and I like to use this little plastic one because I can just wash it up really easily. But you kind of see the sizes that I'm cutting this into, or the lengths here. Maybe you can. Can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. It's difficult when you're your own cameraman. And this thing's hanging around my neck. I should have showed you this thing. But I want to cut this up and cook it up. All right, so we got our bacon cooking in here. It smells really good. This is a hickory smoked bacon. Use a good bacon. Use some bacon can taste a little weird, kind of metallic. It's hard to explain. Maybe it's just a me thing. I don't know. But you can see I've got my bacon cooking in here, and I'm going to cook it up, and then I'm going to cook the ground beef, brown the beef, and brown the pork, and I'll probably do that together. Now, while the meat is browning, I like to make use of the time that I have in between sort of preparations of stuff. So you can cut up your vegetables, you can make your broth. I'm probably going to do that right now. I will say, I'll give you a few tips. One thing is, I'm going to be taking stuff in the pot and out of the pot, so I got a bowl for that stuff. Oftentimes when I have a lot of prep stuff, I like to get like kind of a trash bowl, something I can just keep on the counter and put all my trash stuff in. So like, when I'm peeling my carrots or cutting up my onions, the parts that I don't need, or the ends of, stuff, it's just a good thing to have with that. I guess I'll kind of show you this carrot. I've washed the carrot, but it's already dried up a little bit. Now, one thing that you should know about carrots is, see how it kind of has this little whitish kind of look to it? You could eat, as long as you wash it, you don't even have to peel a carrot, to be honest with you. I do maybe out of habit. I'm not sure if that's a good idea or not. But this sort of whitish kind of, it's not really a skin. There's not a skin on it. It's just sort of dried a little bit, and in a way to protect itself. You want to get like the rough parts and roots and stuff off, but this white stuff is actually sugars that has risen to it, because carrots are kind of sweet. But yeah, just thought you might want to know that about carrots a little bit. So I'm going to do the carrot and the onion and the celery and show you what that looks like. Oh, before I do that though, I will show you on your celery. Your celery stalks kind of come in bunches. Put this in the camera. They kind of come in bunches like this, and they kind of cup one another. This big stalk of these things. Now, they stand upright like this out of the ground. Can you see that? I can't really see. Okay, we go. Upright out of the ground. So dirt and soil and stuff collects in these little bitty crevices here. So when you pull them apart, oftentimes right here is where it's going to be kind of dirty. So you really want to make sure that you clean these things and clean them on the inside, because you literally can get soil and, so maybe even some nastiness in there. You don't want that. Now, they might have a couple spots in them. No big deal. It's not a big deal, but that's how you want to make sure you clean your carrots. Now, I realized last time I said clean your carrots. I didn't mean clean your carrots. I meant clean your celery, because I was thinking about carrots. But when you're cutting your carrots, notice you're going to have sort of a heavy, like a thick side and a thin side. If you cut them in half and you flip them around, now they kind of like fit together, just the way nature works. They fit together really nicely. But what I want to do is I want these things to be kind of small. So with a flat side down, it makes it easy to handle these guys. So I'm going to, watch your fingers when you do this, cut them in smaller links like this, so you can kind of see they're small links. And then when I turn it, I can rock in your knife, make little cubes, little dices with this. I've never been to chef school, so there's a name for this, but I can't quite remember what it is. I'm smelling my bacon, but you can see how this actually is going to be about right. These carrots aren't too big, so you kind of see the dices are kind of small. So yeah, that's how you do that. Now, you're going to want to do your celery and your onions pretty much the same way. You want all these things to be about the same thickness. I'm going to use this bowl here to kind of hold everything in, and while I cut it. So that's what I mean by kind of having that little extra bowl. It can free up your cutting board a little bit, so that you have some space and some room. But yeah, on your celery, you're going to cut the ends off a little bit, because usually those get a little bit nasty. These white bits aren't too great. Typically I look for celery that still has the stalks on it, because those leaves are really, really flavorful and fragrant and beautiful. They're hard to find them though. I even looked at the farmer's market today. They didn't have any celery. But yeah, I'm going to cut these down the middle. Same way. Cut these down the middle. Might need to stir my bacon. Check on my bacon. Bacon's looking pretty good. That looks good. All right, back to my celery. Let's chop these guys up. Make sure your knife is sharp like this one. And use a wooden cutting board. Never use a glass cutting board because it just messes with your knife, and I don't know, it's bad. It's not good. All right. Okay, so I've cooked the bacon. There we go, cooked the bacon. I left the oil in here. I put in the ground beef and the ground pork, and I'm just going to break it up and brown it as well. Pan's gonna, once we brown our beef, we will we'll pre-cook our vegetables a little bit, and then we'll put it all back together. So when we're waiting for the bacon to cook, I went in and cut up our vegetables. And now that we're waiting for the ground beef and the ground pork to cook, I'm going to go ahead and make our broth. I'm going to use probably 2 tablespoons of this this roasted beef paste, but you don't necessarily have to use beef. I've done it with vegetable. Haven't done it with ham. Ham's kind of salty. I think I've done it with chicken. I'm not sure, but beef's always going to be better. So a couple of these in there. 1, 2, because I really want that beefy flavor, and you do need the water. So this is 4 cups of water, warm water. Maybe it's still warm. I don't know. It's warm when I put it in there. And then I just use a whisk because it seems to break it up nicely. And that's kind of it. I mean, you could make just soup with this. If you like, I don't know, cut up some vegetables, maybe some onions, maybe mushroom. You could just eat this as like a beef broth. It's actually really tasty. So, okay, so our meat is almost done. It's all broken up. What I will do at this point now is I am going to go ahead and pepper it. Several cranks of fresh ground pepper. And I am going to season it or salt it. So probably about 6 of these. 2, 3, 4. Stir it up because again we got 2 pounds of meat here. And no seasoning on it. 5, 6. There we go. 6 pinches of salt. Probably should have measured that, but hey, you get the picture. Now, you can see how, can you see in the bottom of that? Okay. See in the bottom here, I've pretty much tried to separate the meat from the oil. I'm going to go ahead and get the rest of this meat out, trying to avoid the oil. And then I'm going to pour it in something that is heat resistant and throw it away. Don't put that down the sink because it can, when it comes back and becomes a solid again, it will clog your sink. Especially if you do it time and time again, and you'll have to get your pipes cleaned. So you don't want to do that. So yeah, I'm going to put this in something and then start on the vegetables. Okay, so for the oil, I found a little water bottle, and I am going to cut the top off this thing and put the oil in here. Can you see that? Yeah, put that oil in here, and then I'm just going to sort of set that down in the trash. When it cools, it will solidify, and we'll just throw that away, okay? We don't want to recycle that for sure. But anyway, that's just a good way to use some trash to get rid of something. So I got my oil poured out. I've put the pan back on the stove to heat it back up again. There's still some little bits of meat down in there and a little bit of oil. That's perfectly fine because I am going to use that to cook our veggies, our Trinity. Down in New Orleans, they call this the Trinity. It's like every dish in New Orleans seems to start with this. And that, all those little bitty, I may not be calling this right. I have to look this up. I think it's called frond, but, I think that's right. You're probably going to Google it and look it up, and I'm probably going to be wrong. but it's something along those lines. I can't remember what it's called, but it is the little bits of meat that stick to the bottom of the pan. As these veggies start to sweat and cook up, it's going to lift all that up into the pan, and then all of that flavor is also going to be infused in this entire dish. So leave that in there because that's where a lot of flavor is. So yeah, we'll cook our vegetables down until they get almost translucent. Okay, so the vegetables are, I think, pretty much done up. There's still a little bit of tenderness to them, but they're not, I mean, they're tender a little bit, but there's still a little bit of body left in them, if you know what I mean. So now I'm going to add about a tablespoon of Italian seasoning. I forgot to mention that earlier. A tablespoon of Italian seasoning. And I'm going to add back the meat back into it. There's the meat. Like I said, so far, not much of a sauce, is it? Now I'm going to add, I already opened this up, back a can of tomato paste to it, like so. And then I want to also add the garlic. I forgot the garlic. There. If you use have a small spatula like this, you can kind of get down into the corners and get that out. Do that, and then I want to add some garlic. Remember, you can kind of squirt out a little bit. That's worth like a clove. I want to put about 6 cloves. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cloves of garlic. I'm going to stir it all up. Get it all nice and blended. That paste, when it warms up, is going to go all the way through it. And then I'm just going to blend it. And then I'm going to add the rest of my ingredients, which isn't much left. And I'll see you in a sec. One other thing that I forgot to mention earlier is also a can of diced tomatoes that I'm going to put in there. The original recipe doesn't really call for it, but I kind of like having a little bite of tomato every now and then. So pretty much got everything else worked through here pretty well. It smells amazing. So now that I've got that, I'm going to add a cup of wine. So use my wine that I had earlier. I'm going to add a cup of good wine. It can be red wine or white wine. It doesn't really matter. I kind of like the little bit of sweetness from the white wine because it's going to cook through there and cut through some of the acid of the tomato. And then I'm also going to add my broth that I made. This is 4 cups of beef stock. You can have actual beef stock, or like from a box, or if you cook some bones down and make some beef stock, you can do that. So now, that, for right now, is my sauce, believe it or not. Again, this is all going to cook down and thicken, so you can see how it's not really much of a sauce. It's an accompaniment of... Accompaniment? Am I saying that right? I'm not sure. Yeah, accompaniment. Oh my God, am I going nuts right now? So yeah, cook this down really slow. I'm going to turn it on low. And this normally will cook for 3 hours. When it's done, add a few more things and we're ready to serve it over noodles. So check back in a minute or hour. So it is the next day. I have taken my Bolognese that I refrigerated and I cooked it and I've simmered it most of the day, probably, what time is it now? 4 hours, maybe somewhere thereabouts, maybe 4 hours I've simmered this, and it is delicious and good and looks amazing. Now I am ready to sort of finish it off and let it simmer for a little bit longer before we serve it. So I've grated some Parmesan cheese. There's probably a cup's worth of cheese. Now I use this, it's called a microplane, which makes this cheese like grate super fine and wispy. So it's like little puffs of air. So this looks like a lot of cheese, but it really isn't. If you use a regular grater, it's probably about a cup's worth of fresh Parmesan cheese that I'm going to add into here. But first, before I add the cheese, I'm going to take some heavy cream, in this case whipping cream, and I'm going to put about 3, you know what, let me shake this up first, because sometimes it gets a little bit striated. So I'm going to take about 3/4 of a cup, and usually on a these kind of cups, there's like little, if you can see them or not, there's little lines here that'll tell you kind of where you are. So this isn't anything magic, but I usually like, in this amount, I use about 3/4 of a cup. And then I am going to stir and add a little cheese at a time. Let's go ahead and stir this up. Now it's going to get kind of creamy. That's what you want. I'm not doing it this time. In the past, I've also like added mushrooms to it. I kind of like that. I didn't do it this time. I actually just kind of forgot. But I like having some mushrooms in this. This dish really kind of almost calls for mushrooms. And you would think there would be more herbs in this. This has a very kind of woodsy, earthy. It's a good autumn dish to have because it's a kind of a heavy dish. But I am just incorporating all of that cheese into here. I don't want to have a big lump of cheese in this anywhere, but this adds a note to it that to me makes it a better dish. Let's finish that off. And I'm going to put it back on the fire for maybe another 30 minutes, and then I'm going to let it rest while I cook my noodles and make my salad and cook my bread. But I'll show you what it looks like at the end. But it's pretty much done. What I might do is taste this and see if it needs anything. The only thing that I might anticipate it needing might be salt, but I kind of doubt it because everything else has sort of made up for it. Make sure you if you are going to test it for salt, make sure you put the cheese in first, because that Parmesan cheese is going to add some salt to the dish. But I salted the meat. I did not salt the vegetables, but the bouillon actually has quite a fair amount of salt in it, the stock, and the cheese is going to add some salt to it. So it should be just about right, but you might test for salt. And then the other thing I might test for, and I oftentimes do in this case, and I might still do this in this case too, is check to see if it needs any sugar or vinegar. Now, I will say that whenever I make like a sauce, like a spaghetti sauce or chili or anything with tomatoes, I like to add, in a pot like this, maybe a teaspoon of sugar, which is not much for this amount, and like maybe a teaspoon or a little bit more, teaspoon and a half of just white vinegar. Those two things come together and almost cancel each other out, so it isn't too sour, it isn't too sweet, but it makes it kind of perfect. But it adds a really nice note to this that makes it even that much more complex. It tastes really good to the tongue. Don't have to do it, but you might want to consider it. All right, I'll show you what it looks like when it is ready to plate. Okay, so a little side note, I did test it. It is so delicious. It is so meaty and yummy and umami, but I do think it could use just a little bit of bite. And so I am going to add that teaspoon of sugar and probably another teaspoon and a half of white vinegar. White vinegar is a good thing to have around just in general, because you can add just a little bit of a bite to something without really flavoring it. White vinegar doesn't have a lot of flavor, but it does. So I have to apologize. I completely forgot to film the plating of it. We got so busy making the bread and the pasta and the vinaigrette and the salad and everything involved that I just forgot. I'm sorry. I meant to show it being plated, but this is the finished product over noodles over the cascatelli. It was delicious. Everyone enjoyed it. I urge you to make it for yourself.